Yeah, just in the finance report, there's an item around the Whakaronga housing. I have a role with Homes of People, but I don't see it conflicting with that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we'll move to number 4, which is a deputation from Mr. Andrew Pearce. I'll invite Andrew up. Welcome, Andrew. And we have, Andrew, we just have 10 minutes for your deputation if there are any questions there. You invite your father up as well, David Pearce. Sorry, Andrew, could you just turn the microphone? Is the microphone on? Is there a button there?
I just wanted to talk about Cuba Street, Rangatiki to George Street mainly. Just a quick brief on our customers. We have high turnover customers in our street, not long-term customers. Our customers come from Dannevirke down to the coast, Masterton, Wanganui. They come once a fortnight to do the main shopping in Palmerston North. About a year or two ago, all-day parking came in, and all-day parking really limits the ability for any of our customers to come in. Then there's the upgrade of Cuba Street. We were basically told that the council has a mandate to get rid of the cars in Palmerston North, and so then and there was nothing really we could do about the reduction of cars, parks, and etc. And then I got an email trying to follow up on that. It said the redevelopment has been completed by the Palmerston North City Council and shared directly with business owners. So yesterday I went through all of the businesses in Cuba Street, bar 2 that went there when I went down, and I said, have you been shown a plan of the roading for Cuba Street? Everyone said no. And then I asked, are you for the 90-degree parking they want to put in? And I was told no by everyone. Are you for all-day parking? Again, no from everyone. Are you against the removal of any more car parks in Cuba Street? 100% yes, they're all against any more removals of car parks. The next thing that they've told me is they want to take away our access to Kui Dry Cleaners, where our garage is, and we have a slight off-road parking. The off-road parking footprint that we have is less than what the hub has for the exit from their car park. It was put in and grandfathered decades ago in conjunction with the then Ministry of Transport. The City Council came up with it, and my father and the fire brigade in the name of safety, and it's been put on me from Spadell and Graham Tong in my times that I've known it, that they knew it was grandfathered and worked with us. They want to put a loading zone in over my car park so they can limit the time a vehicle can park. So we would have to go back to having our garage, entering our garage and putting in another one, which we were entitled to and which we didn't do, with the advice and discussion with the council and other parties, as I alluded to. They say they need that loading zone, but there's a loading zone just up by Crankit and then further up on the other side of us. If they wanted more loading zones, further down Cuba Street where the bus stop is, they've got a bus stop / loading zone. So why couldn't they do that at the loading zone across the road from us?
The bus stop.
The bus stop across the road, yeah. My 3 vans pick up from all over Palmerston North, whether it's out to the airport, whether it's commercial overalls, whether it's down to the fire brigade, the police station, hotels, motels. So by having access with my vans, I limit the amount of vehicles that have to come in and see us anyway. We have depots everywhere. So it's a bit frustrating that for some reason they want to take away all the car parks out of Palmerston North because we don't need them, but all of a sudden they need my driveway entrance, which has been there for decades. And as even one of the things is, why do you need your grandfathered car park? So the project manager must have known about it to say that to me. So just trying to be as brief as I can on it. Oh, and the other thing is, with the upgrade, if we lose more car parks, I don't know, and I don't know how a movie theatre was given approval to advertise for old people, elderly people to come in at 10 o'clock and watch the movies when there's almost no car parks here already. So it's going to be interesting when that's up and running, where they are going to park, considering there's no car parks now. And the other thing is, any information given to the council on the surveys done at the end, in the middle of February, or 2 days after the last school holidays, could only show how quiet the city goes after a school holiday. And that would be the only purpose of doing surveys in February, when you've got school going back, 6 weeks are up with your visa from Christmas, and rates are due. And that's when Palmerston North is at its quietest, because everyone's dead broke. So.
All right, thank you, Andrew. David, you don't want to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. After lots of discussion, the council approved what we were doing. They gave us the green light rather than cross the footpath with our supplies. And it was, I'm very surprised as a person in this room here, one of your councillors that just happened to be on that committee. So he can verify if you're right. And he was one of the engineers that gave permission for us to do that, because I consulted. I went to Wellington and got the New Zealand Road Safety Board. I spoke to the local fire service, which is a very important thing in this particular area. The area from Rangatiki Street to Tainui Street is the main throat of Cuba Street. And it's got to have good access for emergency services. We went through all the parking layouts that the council, the assistant town planner drew up on his desk with a pencil and ruler. And he was shot down in flames and finally got out of the council, followed by the town planner himself. A lot to do with what we fought very hard for. And the fire service now needs easy access to that area because of all the flats and what have you. And it should be not have any more obstacles put in its way. As Andrew said, we service nearly all the motels in Palmerston North, and the in and out of our vehicles was horrendous. Prior to this disease that's around at the moment, we had 3 vehicles on the road. We're down to 1 at the moment, and we do not park there all day. It is like a service, and I must stress it is not not solely to us. Our customers park there and in and out. And to alter anything in Cuba Street, you're going to kill it. As you will, councillors will realise in the next 6 months, you're going to see a lot of empty shops in Palmerston North. I can guarantee that. I did a little survey myself the other day, and I went down to the east side of the square, and I was amazed at the amount of shop owners that were going to shut the door when their lease is up. And I didn't bring that. So that's about all I've got to say, apart from, yes, the loading zone could be utilised with a bus stop, because it appears, in my opinion, certain people in this council staff are trying to obstruct motorists and obviously don't want them in the square. I put it to them. If you had a staff of 18 and had to pay them holiday pay, etc., 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 you would probably understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Dave. There are a couple of questions and I'll allow them. Councillor Me and then Councillor Dennison and Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Andrew. Just your point of 90-degree parking, could you just go a little bit further on that? What were the other retailers' reasoning for not liking 90-degree parking?
Because you can't see when you're backing out, the amount of time it takes to get in there. The elderly that I've talked to that come in say when they try and go in further up the road where they've got 90-degree, they just cannot park in it. From the retailers up there that have got it, that sit there and just watch calamities happening with it being so close to the lights, it just causes mayhem. It's ridiculous. It doesn't enable any ease of flow either.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to your business, it's a long-standing business. I'm not sure how long you've been there, but when was
90 years.
90 years.
90 years, yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned about the van options. If you didn't have the van options to park on the street, you'd have to park inside your building and
Yep. So we'd have to go back to that.
across the footpath.
Because we had concertina entrances there before it was Pink and Collinson's, and originally it was actually the trucks went all the way through the building and out the other side.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
David.
I forgot to add that I have spent 40 years of my working life in Cuba Street. So if anybody wants to know about Cuba Street, come and ask me, because I was nicknamed the mayor after the last big debacle.
Councillor Finlay.
Andrew, you said that a staff member said to you or sent an email to you saying they had a mandate to get rid of cars in the CBD?
No, that was, we had, it was Simon and Matt told us, this was Woody from Cuba, Steve from Crankit Cycles and myself. We wanted to talk about it. They basically said they have a mandate to get rid of the cars in Palmerston North. People need to want to walk 400 metres apparently to do their shopping. So we were told that they had a mandate. There was nothing we could do or say because they had already had a mandate, and our only option was to go and talk to our councillors, but even they couldn't do anything because they were already given the mandate to do this.
Did they say where they got the mandate from?
No, they didn't say where they got the mandate, but they said it was their mandate.
Okay. Going back to this, your garage now, because it's a garage and for vehicles, you've got probably legal right to have a vehicle crossing there, do you not?
Yeah.
Okay. Along that, if you started that vehicle crossing, approximately how many crossings over the footpath would be held a day?
If we had all three vans going, it would be at busier times of the day, every half an hour, a van would be going across it, and then just depends on the day of the week too.
So David, this is probably for you. When you first agreed with the council not to have a crossing there, for a park instead. Was that mandated by the Crown Council, or the council agree to that? And that'll keep the
It's a good idea.
the vehicles off the road?
Well, it was
Oh,
one of the
well,
ideas after we spoke with the transport, the traffic department, the chief, Mervyn Bassett was his name, and the fire chief. There is a letter sent to the council from the fire department, and also there's one that I overlooked. There's one from the city council lawyer was sent to this council after the debacle we had with the last lot.
Okay. Just one other very quick question. Because vehicle access is actually essential to your business, are you saying that if we take the parks away, you'll have to get the vehicle crossing put back in again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll speed this up, folks, but there is a couple that want to speak. So Councillor Barrett and then Councillor Johnson.
My question was cleared, thanks.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Andrew and David. I haven't seen what's been proposed, and so you coming to speak to us now is I'm playing catch up with what you've been told and what actually is proposed. So are you able to clarify what you've been told is the proposal in terms of reduction of car parks in that segment of Cuba Street?
So when they were doing the last one, at that stage, there was 11 car parks on the other side, and they said up to 6 on Kui's side.
So your understanding is that there would be a loss of 6 car parks on the segment between Rangatike and Tainui Street.
On Kui's side, and
on your side,
and on Briscoe's side, I think it was up to 11. It was all of them basically.
Okay, so a total of up to 17 car parks
Yes.
in we'll call it your segment of Cuba Street, right? So that is one of the issues that you brought to us, and the other one, which other councillors have asked about, is the issue of your designated park for your business.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is basically just in our driveway access anyway.
Yes,
So
I
it's,
understand, but there's a curb there, so.
No, we can
You
drive
can
in.
still
We
drive
can
in
still
there.
drive in. Yes.
Okay. So
But you haven't seen the plan.
Well, no, sorry. And going back to the plan, I think this was sent to all the councillors by Robert Van Benton, and it states that the redevelopment plan has been completed by the PNCC and shared directly with affected business owners. And as my survey says, not one person has seen it.
So you haven't seen it yourselves?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I doubt that the council, some of the councillors have seen it either.
Well, I don't think I've seen it unless I have a very poor memory. Thank you.
All right, was there any other councillors? Councillor Beattie, was it?
It's okay, Lorna's ours.
Okay, all right. Thank you, gentlemen. Your comments are noted. I'll look to move. You're free to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So we have we must resolve to note the deputation. I'll look to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comments. Councillor Finlay.
I don't know, it's not actually a comment, but it's a question on my mind that I'd like to have asked at some stage or an answer. Who has actually seen this plan?
Infrastructure GM would just like to comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. At the moment, we do not have a finalised conceptual design for this area. We've got we're close, and soon we'll be in a situation where we can circulate that for comment. Once we do have that finalised conceptual design, we will consult with the businesses in that area, and we'll legitimately consult with Andrew and the other business owners. But at the moment, the question of right angle parks versus incline parks, the reduction in car park, those decisions have not even been made in draft form yet. Thank you.
Councillor Meehan.
I'd just like to comment on the 90-degree parking. Going back to my last term in council, the discussion was had then about 90-degree parking, and I haven't had a community member say to me they agree with 90-degree parking. We're here to work for the community, yet we don't seem to listen to the community. I haven't had one person that I've spoken to agree with 90-degree parking, yet we still go ahead with it.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm surprised that we've got this presentation because I thought that we had done a lot of communications with the people in Cuba Street. And I know there has been issues with the short-term parking with some of those businesses, the model shop and that, because a lot of the retailers just go in, people shopping just go in for 15 minutes. And I had raised that earlier on in the year. So I would like to see if we could have a short-term look at, before the plan comes out, to have a look at that short-term parking, because I mean, they're businesses, and in this environment, we should be working with them, not against them.
Councillor Harpeder.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I agree with what everybody has said, and I just want to defend the officers, because at this stage, they are listening to what they've gone out and had some discussions, and I think they are listening to what has been said, and they haven't gone out with a plan. So I think it is all sitting on ice at the moment, and I just think we just, as councillors, don't want to react too much until something has come up with a plan. So I just think we've all just got to hold until an actual discussion document is ready to go out, so that the officers can actually put something in front of the community, because I don't think we're all ready to jump, and there's nothing to actually jump on yet. So I think we should just wait until there's something to go out and do a proper consultation with our community. So I just think, let's just wait. It was great to get that presentation, but we do need to wait. That's all. I just want to say that.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to make a brief comment on the Angle Parks. About 3 to 3.5 years ago, council asked for a safety audit on what was proposed as 90-degree parks in the planning and the square development. And that safety audit came back with significant issues around the safety of 90-degree parks. And at that time, council gave direction to go back to the Angle Parks for the planning. It came as a big surprise to me when the initial Cuba Street development implemented 90-degree parks, which was opposed to the direction that council had given at the time. So in the planning going forward, I think it's really important that that safety audit and the direction that council gave at the time is given consideration in the planning.
And Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I agree with Councillor Naylor's comments about the 90-degree parks, and was going to mention that myself, so I won't repeat that. I don't agree with Councillor Harpiter. If it's got to the stage where business owners feel the only way that they can be heard is to bring a deputation to council, then I think the communication's already not been good enough. And whether or not there's a draft plan or a concept plan or an actual plan, discussions have been held. Clearly, at least one business is under the impression that there's going to be a significant reduction in car parks, that there'll be 90-degree parking, and that their long-standing access for their business will be reduced. And for them to feel that the only way to get any traction is to come to council and talk to us about it is a bit disappointing. And it's not about jumping, it's not about defending people, it's about having an open process where businesses don't feel that their only option is to come and appeal to councillors. So I really think that we need to be open-minded about this and understand that if it gets to the point of a business coming here to tell us how concerned they are, something's gone wrong with the comms somewhere. And so I certainly accept that something has gone wrong with the comms. I myself am not aware of exactly what is planned, and I doubt many councillors are. So I'd just like to reassure Andrew and David that your deputation has been heard and that we will take this on board. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, councillors, that's exhausted the comments. We have the resolution there, and I will put it now to the vote. It has passed 15 votes for and none against. I'm just doing my maths. Somebody has died.
I'm quite alive, but this technology is quite there.
All right, we'll get you re-established, reconnected, and we will, yeah, the defibrillator's just on now, yeah. And we'll retake that vote if we can, please. Okay, thank you. All right, that has passed 16 votes for and against, thank you. We now move to number 5 on the order paper, which is confirmation of the minutes, that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 24th of June 2020, Part 1, public, be confirmed as true and correct. It'll come up on screen in a moment. I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any matters arising. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to the declarations of interest, I believe in the segment under that where it says that I abstain from voting. I actually, I haven't seen the actual finance minutes, but I believe I withdrew from that item and didn't vote on that item. And if that could be corrected. Thank you.
Okay, it's noted. We'll get that corrected. No other matters arising? All right, we will put this to the vote. Thank you. As passed, 16 votes for, none against. We now move to the report side of the agenda. And number 6 there is a memo around the understanding of the Three Waters Services reform. It's from our CE, Heather Shotter, on page 37 of your papers. I'll pass to you, Heather.
I'm just going to take the memo as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions or assist in the discussion.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions? Okay, we'll start with you, Councillor Rutherford, and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Heather. Just one question in regards to the process. Obviously, there is the ability to opt out really at any time. I'm just wondering, what is the time frame if we were to opt into this process and then decided at some point that actually it wasn't something we wanted to be a part of? How long would it take us to opt out? Do you know?
Yeah, you can opt out. You'll be given another opportunity to opt out before the next tranche. So I think it's June next year. So we have probably until May when the next recommendation will come to councils to approve or not approve.
And is your opinion that the ability to opt out is a good enough backstop or safety net that actually it is something that we should proceed with?
Yes, it is my recommendation that you adopt these recommendations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. One is, do you see any particular risks in us agreeing to this MOU?
No, I don't.
And the other one is, do we expect that there will be additional cost involved in the commitments that we're making by signing this MOU?
That's a very good question, actually. I don't believe so, because it is certainly the intention of any delivery plan that those costs would be built into that.
Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in item 3, recommendation 3, when it says that all councils need to agree on the approach to distribute the regional allocation. If we can't agree, do we just work out that we just have proportioned in what the first allocation was.
We've actually agreed. So
Okay.
we had a meeting last week of all the regional territorial authorities, and we took the opportunity to have a brief meeting with the mayors and chair and the CEs, and the mayor and chairs, the chair and mayors voted unanimously to accept the recommendation of the steering group, which was to roll over the allocation to the 75-20 on the basis of the 75-25% allocation. So basically, our money is doubled.
Okay, thank you for that update.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Heather, for the paper. Just a couple questions. The first is the paper in 4.5 refers to the multi-regional ownership model as a prospect, and just wondered if you could comment around the likelihood of that versus other possible ownership models as far as where the discussion's at this point in time.
The multi-regional ownership model is certainly the preference, and that is what is being looked at the moment.
Thank you. The other question that I had was just around the delivery plan, which is referred to, and obviously a fairly short time frame on getting that organized. Can you give us some insight into what we might be seeing in that plan?
I can, actually. We have started preparation on that in anticipation that you would sign the MOU, because we have a very limited time in which to get that in. And it is certainly my preference to get that in as quickly as we can, because as you can imagine, Crown Infrastructure Partners will be processing a number of these plans, and until they're approved, we don't get our money. So we have started working on that. It will be so we're looking at bringing some work forward, and I must commend Mike Monahan and Robert Van Bentum and their staff, who have been working very quickly on this to get it to us. But it is a mix of new and renewed capital program, as well as some operational expenditure. And just look, none of these are certainly finalised yet, so I wouldn't really want to discuss them in too much detail, but there'll be things like there'll be pump renewals. We're looking at some work around some of our bores. So some of those were already things that we were looking at for year 2. They will be, some might be some of the shovel-ready projects. There'll be work around, what have I got here? Yeah, bores. We're looking at some work in Ashurst as well. We're looking at some pipe upgrades. We're looking at the pipe conditions. So some of our condition reports work like that.
Thank you. So just to be clear on that, would be an approach with that funding of additionality rather than substitution?
Yes, it is. So you cannot use the money for the work that you already have planned. It needs to be brought forward. It does put, as you can imagine, a great deal of additional workload on our area, and we will look to see how we can build capacity into those particular projects.
Thank you. And just finally, I suppose at this stage, and obviously it's fairly early on in a multi-year process, but at this stage, if there were concerns in the community about potential future privatization of water, what sort of assurances could we take back to the community at this stage?
I think the government's preference for the multi-region, and certainly their preference, is for ownership to sit within the local authorities, so that they are a multi-region local authority ownership model, and so there is certainly from government no intention that these be privatised model.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Heather, for that. It was a question specifically about 6.10, where you say we've sought a legal opinion that advises that the MOU doesn't contain any explicit triggers for consultation. So I wondered, why did we seek that opinion? Do we think that there's a risk that it could have triggered? And is that view shared across government and the other TAs that are facing the same issue?
That was sought by the steering group itself as an assurance.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Petrinas.
Just a quick query in respect of the MOU. Will it have any impact on the wastewater BPO study that we're currently doing?
It's probably a bit early for that.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, councillors. So we have the rather significant list of 12 recommendations for council. I'll take them as one unit. I'll look to move those. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor, and I'll open it up for comments. Before we go to you, Councillor Johnson, look, councillors, this to me is a bit of a no-brainer in the sense that it is much needed new money in critical waters infrastructure. For once, the government has listened in this space, and I have to commend the Minister of Local Government for really pushing ahead with this. Yes, there's still a lot of, I suppose the devil is in the detail, but they are releasing this money quite quickly in a much needed time, not only for post-COVID and jobs, but in critical waters infrastructure. Effectively, with the doubling of the city's regional allocation, that's 9.5 million that will be spent on our assets. Renewals, as the CE has said, around stormwater network, much needed. We know infiltration of our pipe network is a concern for all TAs, including Palmerston North, but freshwater bores and also the wastewater network and plant. I know we're going through the BPO process, but this can be used very wisely. So I do encourage you to vote for this. I get all the questions around what is coming next and all of that. We are fortunate that we have Heather actually on the government steering group, so we are getting that that knowledge firsthand, and an element of co-designing as well. Heather and I are speaking to the Minister of Local Government next Monday, specifically about what the city is doing in this space. So I hope that I can talk to her with a positive outcome of this morning. So please, I do ask you to support this. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I absolutely agree with your comments. I'm very happy to support this. I welcome government recognising that there is an infrastructure deficit in local authorities across the country. Ours may be less than some of the smaller authorities, but nevertheless, it's a welcome injection of funds into a very important area for the community. So I think we'd be very foolish at this stage not to sign up to it. We do have an out later on if we're not happy with the way things are going. But I think, government has clearly signalled that water reform is on the agenda, and this is part of it. And getting infrastructure up to a better level with central funds rather than ratepayer funds is very attractive. And so I think, like yourself, I hope that there will be unanimous support for this. There are, as Councillor Barrett has mentioned, there are some concerns about where this will lead. But at this stage, I'm comfortable that there isn't a privatisation agenda, and that is something that I'll be looking quite carefully at, whether or not that's planned, because I do think that water is something that we should keep in public ownership.
Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support all recommendations from the Chief Executive that are in front of us. I attended the roadshow that came around, and I did ask questions specifically around water privatisation, because I did have concerns around that. The answers that were given to me did alleviate most of my concerns, and I guess keeping in mind that actually any government could charge ahead with that agenda now anyway. I think that you know, if we look at this opportunity, we don't have to take it up, but it would be silly if we didn't. Being able to contribute to the reform, be inside of the tent rather than out, and access funding to invest in our assets that we were going to invest in anyway. You know, these are not optional assets when it comes to investment. They're critical infrastructure. And I think what it comes down to for me is that the opt-out clause is still very much a clear exit if we needed to take that. And so at this stage, I think that we should charge ahead with this and definitely be a part of it.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. Well, it's certainly not every day that the DIA shows up with bags of money. And so, you know, we could say it's actually a very rare day indeed. And yet, I think for me, when it comes to water reforms, it is something that is also that we need to weigh quite carefully, even when we have the thick end of 10 million bucks on offer just for having a look under the hood. And I will say that I've got actually reasonably mixed feelings about what the future might hold in this area. Clearly, the status quo isn't all that sustainable. I think we'll see that most sharply in relief when we try to put the biggest number we've ever tried to put into a long-term plan into the long-term plan in a few months' time. But I do think that a yes vote today also brings some concern with it, and that I think it will begin a process that will pit local control against greater investment and greater environmental protection. And I do acknowledge that obviously today is only the first and quite small step, and that it is technically reversible, but it does actually set us on a path where a lot will be at stake. Water is very much at the core of our individual human rights and our collective rights as a community. And in our city alone, we're thinking about the future of hundreds of millions of dollars of assets that have been built up over 150 years of local rates and local investment. And I think that the underlying questions here ultimately are quite serious. The questions about our water, who owns it, who supplies it, who owns the network, who ensures that it doesn't end up getting bottled up and shipped off, who ensures that we don't end up with diminished control in the long term. And so I think at every stage in this process, we really do need to make sure that we have strong assurances for our community that we will continue to have a voice and a choice locally about what happens with our water, and that we will have strong assurances for long-term public ownership and public control. Our community really does need us to get this right. And I think a yes vote today has to go hand in hand with a commitment to ensuring local accountability and ongoing public ownership in the long term through successive governments into the future, and that we have public control and public influence here in Palmerston North. We do know that we're really up against it locally when we think about the water infrastructure locally, and that growing gap between what our infrastructure is demanding and what we can actually afford out of a local rate space is incredibly evident. Now, what we've often argued at the table here is that the solution to that is to get a slice of the GST pie to come back locally. And that'd be wonderful if that could have eventuated, but I think actually accepting what's on offer today is probably an admission that we're not winning that argument of just getting our hands directly on government money through things like a slice of GST. And actually the government's preference is to hold on to the money and to begin to exert greater control over local services. If it's done well, this can actually work out all right in the future, I think. Control of water services through a more central mechanism isn't in and of itself a bad thing. But as the mayor referred to, the devil indeed will be in the detail. And we don't need to look too far afield to see where some of those potential issues could arise in the future. We already see the Wellington water situation. We see water care and some of the issues up there as well. And along similar lines, you don't have to look any further than the implosion of the DHBs on occasion to understand that sort of regional aggregation and central funding isn't necessarily a guarantee of success in its own right. Or you don't have to look further than things like the transport agency and realize that a single central entity also carries its own challenges. So for me, the bottom line is that today is that first step, and obviously still a lot of water to go under the bridge, but we need to keep our eyes very, very open in this process as we work with the DIA in writing the next chapter of water reform in New Zealand. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. I was hoping you were going to wrap up. Thank you. Councillor Barton.
A couple of brief comments, Your Worship. I think one of the qualities that elected members tend to share is a natural, healthy cynicism, particularly when people come bearing gifts. But there's the saying, you shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth, and this is a rather unusual situation of the DIA being the gift horse, as Councillor Barrett has referred to. But I do feel actually we have looked at that gift horse pretty clearly in the mouth. We've looked to see what's on offer. Clause 9 says that we would go ahead in good faith. And I feel confident that at this stage of the process, we can go ahead in good faith, having done our due diligence on as much as we can know. You know, many of us attended that roadshow to try and understand as fully as possible what was being offered to us and the potential fishhooks in that. Colleagues have had good questions, real questions about where this might take us. But at the moment, as we start down this path, unless you've got a handy crystal ball, and I certainly don't, we don't know where it would take us, but there is money on the table for assets that we need to invest in. So at this stage, I'm really happy to start down that path. But I'm particularly happy to start down that path knowing that we start from inside the tent, commending the CE for her work as part of this process. That gives us a voice that's maybe more amplified than other cities in our position, and also the Mayor's active participation in these discussions, getting the concerns of our council heard at the highest level, I think gives me confidence that as we step into this space, that wherever it takes us, we'll have done our due diligence from getting there. So I'm happy to support.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to second and support these, obviously. As councils face the critical consideration of meeting water reform needs in terms of infrastructure, this is a good place and space, I think, for this council to be in. As others have said, there's nothing to lose. I think we can re-examine, council can re-examine early next year. The city at this point in time will get some much needed coin. The region will get much needed coin as well. I think, as others have said, this council has shown and demonstrated that it has actually been leading in this space, not only in terms of the turnout from the recent roadshow, but also the role that the Chief Executive has played. And I think it's appropriate in terms of these recommendations that the delegation does actually sit with the Chief Executive in terms of being able to progress this and obviously move it forward as well. So happy to support, as Councillor Barrett has said, it is a first small step, but it's an important one in terms of the journey of leadership that this council will continue to show in this infrastructure space.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. No further comments? Right, before I put it to the vote, I'll just wrap up. Look, status quo is not an option. It really is not an option. And I think we're coming to that realisation very quickly as a council. And let's be honest, our water assets are in pretty good nick. So we're not the worst of the TAs by any margin at all. And the government is actually our natural partner. Just remind councillors that the Ministry of Works were our partner 50 years ago. So there is an element of back to the future here. We have that opt-out clause. So I don't share Councillor Barrett's concerns as much. There is devil in the detail, and privatisation, nobody wants privatisation. And I can tell you from the current government, in fact, pretty well everybody around the table, they've seen the pitfalls overseas of what happens there. They've even seen some of the things that have happened across the ditch. Our own sister city, Missoula, had to buy back its water company or provider several years ago from the Canadians who owned it and charged them a fortune for their own water. So I don't think there'd be a mayor in this country that would be into a privatisation model. And I think the government's real agenda here is about improving the assets, keeping them in local ownership, but they know that the TAs and the ratepayers can't do that by themselves. So, councillors, this to me is a no-brainer. Please vote for this. We'll see 9.5 million spent on our critical water assets in the next year. I'll put it to the vote. Thank you. It has passed, 16 votes for and none against. We now move to number 7, which is on page 83, which is around delegation to NZTA to issue permits. There's a memo there from Transport Manager Robert Van Bentum. Robert, if you to speak to this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, really all I'd sort of just say in summary is that this is a regulatory process. Currently, the issuing of permits for oversized and overweight vehicles is shared between the agency and ourselves. Historically, I suppose the reason why we've kept the approval of particularly overweight and HPMV, which is a subclass of overweight, in-house is that we felt, we could exercise some control and management. Now it's clear that the agency has very much improved systems, very good information about our network and our assets, and we feel it's appropriate both from a efficiency point of view for truck owners and operators, and from our own staffing perspective that we delegate these authorities now to the agency. There is actually a net sort of small saving in terms of staff time, largely because the charges or the fees that we can levy for these are set in statute, and they haven't moved for many years, and they're very nominal. So, that is one of the advantages. There is a significant number of, these permits issued, and generally we feel that the risk to council of, delegating this to the agency is very low. So essentially that's the recommendations really I'm putting to you here in terms of this report. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Robert. I have a couple. You said there's a large number. How many permits are issued in the city, and specifically how many by the city, by the council? In rough numbers.
Yeah, we typically are issuing for overweight, which is essentially the ones that we've kept control of, something like 200, 250 a year, so 5 a week is the typical workload. I'm not sure how many the agency are issuing. They manage all of the overweight, the overlength or over-dimensioned permits. So currently you'll be aware of the the turbine blades which are travelling. They will issue permits to those operators. Yeah.
And Robert, these are typically milk, tankers, overweight forestry, construction, military vehicles. Is that what we're talking?
Yeah. Some years ago, 2010, the agency created a category called high performance motor vehicles. It was really a subclass of overweight and slightly over length vehicles. And I described the categories here up to, I think, about 62 tonne, and the length was, those are the vehicles you see with the yellow H sign on them. So all of those vehicles need to have permits, but they travel on designated routes. So every year we have to renew those permits. But outside of that, of course, there are those one-off loads, as you mentioned, Your Worship. The New Zealand Defence Force has vehicles which exceed current load standards. But we have large, transformer loads, large, heavy weight, type loads. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a question just around with the delegation to NZTA, will we be able to track in the future any increase or decrease in the number of permits?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that information is available to us from the agency. They already manage permits for a large number of TAs within New Zealand, so this is a well-trodden path. So we can certainly, they will still liaise with us over probably the next 12 months to get a good understanding of our network and the particular assets that are, shall we say, problematic. Most of our problems are around our bridges, and you'll already be aware that a number of our bridges are already weight restricted. So, I mean, they have either posted weights or we've already got restrictions on operators. So, yeah, no, but we certainly we'll get the data out of them in terms of the numbers of permits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Robert. The report says that the council is issuing on average 500 permits a year.
Right.
And it also says it takes 1 to 3 hours to issue a single permit. If you take an average 2 hours, this 500 permits would take at least half of the full-time equivalent employment. So are we expecting any job losses, at least half a job loss as a result?
No, at the moment we're using what we call some of the design team to take this work. So what will happen is if we stop doing this work, those staff will be available to do other design projects, which we're currently employing consultants for. So essentially, the staff will just be redeployed to do other valuable work for council. There's certainly no staff losses envisaged. No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Robert. That's exhausted the questions. Councillors, we have 5 recommendations. Sorry. I will look to move them in one group, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comments. The only comment I'll probably make is this is a pretty important area for us with our investments around intermodal freight and the proposed ring road to connect with the rail hub. So I'm sure the agency will probably see the amount of traffic that truly is going through our city. I just look at just coming back from up north just recently, you don't go through Taupo now, or the trucks don't go through Taupo. They don't go through Hamilton and they don't go through Tauranga, but they still come through Palmerston North. So just a little hint to our agency friends. All right. We have the 5 recommendations. We'll put those to the vote. And that is passed 15 votes for with 1 abstention. Okay, sorry, that vote is incorrect. It should be 16 votes for. There's no abstention. So that's 16 votes for. Oh. Okay. Okay, we'll list that when if the officers could note the abstention of Councillor Harpiter, who was out of the room when the vote was taken, when the discussion was taking place. Okay, we now move on to number 8, which is the Palmerston North Airport Limited final statement of intent for 2020-21 year. Memo there from Steve Patterson, our strategy finance manager. Steve, I'll take it as being read, page 115. Are there any other comments you want to add, please?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, that this part of what was decided last time when we met with the company was that they would come back to us in October. So whilst this is the final statement, it is in a sense final for the moment, but we'll look to have an update from them in October when they come back again.
Great, and yeah, appreciate that things are moving in this space. Right, councillors, is there any questions for Steve? Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's only a short question. On page 7 and item number 10, yes, 10, it says roadmap to carbon neutrality complete. Can you please elaborate what does it mean? What was the road to carbon neutrality and how does it complete?
Yes, my understanding was the company was preparing a program of the way forward in terms of reaching carbon neutrality, and so they were looking to have that particular program established during the 1920 year as to what they were going to do going forward, and that's so we'll get an update on that when we get their annual report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Are there any other questions of Steve? There being none. Thank you, Steve. Right, we have the two recommendations there. Again, I'll take them as one and I'll look to move them. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comments. There being none, we will put it to the vote. That has passed 16 votes for, none against. We move now to number 9 on our agenda, page 133 of your papers, councillors. It's around the section 17A review of Acacia Birch House, and there's a memo there presented by our strategy manager, Julie McDonald. Julie, take it as being read. Are there anything else you'd like to add to it?
No, there's not. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Julie. Just a quick question. Have we got funding in place for this, or will it be done?
This review's been done internally.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just ask one question, Julie, if I can. So we've spoken to the board?
Yes.
Great. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Julie. Just to check then, would this require a further round of consultation with the community, given that we've already recently had consultation around Section 17 and CCOs?
If the outcome of the review is a recommendation for change, then yes, there would be community consultation
At that
following.
point. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, councillors, and no further questions. Thank you, Julie. We have the two recommendations there. I'll look again to take them as a group. I'll look to move them, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for comments. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up on the question you asked Julie about discussions with the board. I went with the General Manager to meet with the board when we realised this proposal would come to Council this quickly. We sat down with their chair and with their manager to explain the thinking behind this piece of work coming forward in quite a short time frame from the last time we asked similar questions. And as set out in the report, we explained that to the board, and they certainly saw why we had taken this position at this time, and are very open to working with Council to look again at how they might achieve the goals that we have in common for Acacia Birch between Council and their board. So no surprises, and they're very happy to undertake that work with us.
Great. Thank you, councillor, and great that you've spoken to them. I think it was wise that we talk to them first before we undertake this work. Okay, councillors, no further comments. We will look to vote, please. That has passed 16 votes for and none against. Thank you. We now move to number 10, which is around Resource Management Act Commissioner Schedule, page 139. There's a memo there from our Governance Manager, Hannah White. Hannah, as the others, on page 139 of your papers, councillors, take it as being read. Is there anything you'd like to add to it?
Only, Mr. Mayor, to note that on page 140, the first bullet point, the only change to previous years is that we're hoping to spend a bit more effort and time in seeking tikanga knowledge on the schedule.
Thank you. Right, I'll open it up for any other questions. Councillor Johnson and then Councillor Rutherford.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Hannah. In terms of the proposed review, have you taken into consideration any changes that might be coming up in the next few months in terms of council's own provision of hearing commissioners and chairs? In other words, when was the review, when was this piece of work done and how far ahead are you looking?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you rephrase that?
No, it's external. Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Sorry. What I'm saying is, in terms of looking ahead, and I see, for example, that you've specifically said that you're going to be looking for those interested or participating as chair or deputy chair of district plan hearings. How far have you taken into account council's internal provision, and how far are you just doing what's been done before, I suppose is what I would say.
Right. So council's internal provision is the hearings committee, and then we also always have a schedule of external commissioners, and the decision over whether there's a panel, which is a mix of an external commissioner leading it plus panel members from the hearings committee, or whether it's fully external, is dependent on the application as it goes forward. So if it was an external resource consent, for example, an individual can request whether it be an external. So where it comes to planning, we're never exactly sure how many requests we're going to have either way. So I suppose, in short, I can say that this is a similar model to what has been used in the past.
Thank you.
Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Hannah. Just a time frame on when you're expecting this process to be completed?
So if this goes through today, we'll get the advertisement out this week and we'll be open for a month. We'll go through the normal selection panel process and bring that back to council. So I'm hoping we'll be back to council for November.
Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just in terms of seeking the part in the report that talks about seeking commissioners with tikanga knowledge, I'm just wondering if there is any discussion with iwi to help inform that.
Yes, so we have had a couple of conversations with Rangatane in this space. Yes, it would be fantastic to have mana whenua, but the reason I have phrased it as tikanga is potentially we are getting knowledge from external commissioners who work throughout the country. So it's not necessarily a mana whenua that we will be appointing. However, there is a preference, of course, to allow for that space. In particular, we have spoken to Rangatane about building capacity for bringing on a mana whenua member into our hearings committee.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Hannah. Just following on from Councillor Rutherford's question around timeframes, and you indicated November might be when we'd see things back. And just looking at the second recommendation and acknowledging that there's a risk, you might say, that we won't have a chairperson of the hearings committee in continuity through that time. Have you considered whether we should have within that recommendation an ability for an alternate or a delegate to continue that function through this process?
It would be in the position, it would be for the mayor to appoint the chair of the hearings committee should we need that to happen. Noting the timing of the general election, that would be possible to bring to the October council meeting. So I don't foresee that we would have an issue there. The alternative would be that that the council decides to put the deputy chair of the hearings committee in the selection panel as a failsafe.
What we could do, councillors, we could put in there the chairperson and deputy chairperson of the hearings committee. We've also got the chairperson of planning and strategy.
This is in person.
Which I've just figured out what I've just said.
Indeed.
It's the same person. I'll just ask the Deputy Mayor to comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the normal process would be if there was an inability of that person to undertake that role, that the deputy would effectively step up. So if, for example, there was a vacancy in the chair of the hearings committee, then the deputy chair would step up, which would mean that the deputy chair of the planning and strategy would then fill that person's role. So I think it's probably actually safe as it's worded currently, only if there's a vacancy.
Right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'll look to move the recommendations there. They're on page 139. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any comments. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Happy to support this. I just want to respond, I think, to an issue in questioning that Councillor Johnson had covered. I think it relates to the ongoing nature of the council's approach to the sectional district plan review. What will actually happen in that space is that the hearings committee working around that, and a report will eventually make its way to the council to make a decision around how that process will roll out. So whether that's either the hearings committee itself will exercise that delegation, or whether we go through a process as we have done for the last 10 years and then prior to that the 10 years previously. But in terms of this, I think it's important that we are reviewing it. My view that people will be aware of is I think that actually the hearings committee should be the holder of the delegation to make appointments to the schedule. But as it stands currently, that's not currently permissible under the delegations manual. So this will come back to the council. But I think the process needs to get underway, and it's a good one that's worked in the past.
Thank you. All right, no further comments. I'll put this to the vote, please.
Here we go.
We're just having some technical hitches. We'll redo that vote, please. Okay, can you please vote again?
We don't need this anymore.
Now it's through. 16 for, none against. Thank you. Number 11, as we're aware, has been on our order paper, has been withdrawn. The Hokowhitu Village Centre have found their own chairperson. So we now move through to number 12, which is the council work schedule for August 2020. It's on page 147, 148. And I'll open it up for any comments or questions. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my question's around item 3, remits from PNCC. I wondered if somebody could speak to the process or time frame for seeking remit proposals from elected members, and also if that would automatically roll forward the ones that were missed this year.
I'll ask the planning manager to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. The normal process is to call for remits from elected members just before Christmas and to bring them to the February-March meeting, depending on the timing of either metro sector meetings or zone 3 meetings where we gather support. And yes, I would envisage that any remits already submitted that we missed through the process this year due to COVID and timing, etc., would just roll forward. Thank you.
All right. So we have the work schedule there. We need to receive that. I'll look to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. No further questions or comments. We'll put it to the vote. It's passed 16 votes for and none against. Right, we now have the number 13, which is the minutes of our Part 1 Public Rangatane o Manawatu recommendations from its meeting of the 29th of July 2020 meeting on page 149. I'll look to move those, seconded by Councillor Naylor. And I'll ask if there are any matters arising from those. There being none, we'll look to vote on those, please. That has passed 14 votes for, 2 abstentions. All right, now move to number 14, which is recommendations from the Community Development Committee. I'll ask the Chair, Councillor Johnson, to speak to that, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to present the recommendations from the Part 1 Public Community Development Committee meeting of the 5th of August for adoption.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Bowen. Are there any matters arising? Councillor Hafida.
Can I have 36, 20 separate, please?
Okay, so just waiting for the technical side. Okay, so we'll do the first vote around clauses 30 to 35, and we'll come back to 36 in a moment. So we're just voting on 30 to 35, please. So if you could vote. This passed 16 votes for. We'll now go back for clause 36. Right, we are ready to vote, please. And that has passed 13 votes for with 3 abstentions. Right, we'll go now to the committee minutes of Arts, Culture and Heritage, and I'll ask the Chair, Councillor Bowen, to speak to those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to present the recommendations from the Part 1 Public Arts, Culture and Heritage committee meeting on the 12th of August for adoption. Which was seconded by Councillor Barrett. And just to update members on discussion following 1920.3, where concerns were raised about the Te Manawa statement of intent. Te Manawa asked me to reflect that outside of the formal process, they were very much engaged with the issues raised by members at the time and intend to present at the next Arts, Culture and Heritage in November their ongoing work in those areas, which I was pleased to say we'd be able to facilitate, and note at that time that if we still want to remove or add any content to their statement of intent, we would certainly be able to do that to this year's statement of intent under section 65(2) of the Local Government Act. So just to update Council on that position. Thank you.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Barrett, I believe. Yeah, thank you. All right, are there any comments to these? There being none, we will vote, please. Has passed 16 votes for, none against. We'll now move to the Planning and Strategy Committee minutes, and the Chair, Councillor Rutherford. Speak to this, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to present the Part 1 Public Planning and Strategy Committee recommendations from the 12th of August meeting for adoption.
Seconded by Councillor Hancock. Thank you. Are there any matters arising to those? There being none, we will vote, please. That has passed 16 votes for and none against. Right, we go now to number 17, which is the committee minutes of the Finance and Audit. I ask the Chair, Councillor Beattie, to speak to this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that the recommendations from the Financing Committee meeting of the 19th of August be adopted.
And seconded by Councillor Naylor. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? There being none, we will vote, please. And that has passed 16 votes for, none against. Right, we will just adjourn till 11:45, and we will then start the part 2 part of the meeting. But thank you, councillors and staff.
You want to move into part 2 first?
Okay, we will. Thank you, councillor. That's
Not
a good,
a problem, mate.
good suggestion.
$50.
All right. This is being taped, councillor.
She's all right.
We will look to go into part 2, and I will look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, for reasons set out around third-party commercial and privacy reasons. And we have moved that and seconded. No comments or questions to that. Councillor Dennison.
Just wondered, have we done the finance paper, or are we doing it after the part?
We've already we've just passed.
We've just done it? Okay, sorry, I've just missed it.
All right. That's fine. We've checked. Thank you. All right. I'll ask you to vote, please. Can you just check you've voted, please, councillors? Right, thank you. We got you. 16 for, none against. Thank you. Right, we'll adjourn the meeting and 1:45 back at the table. Thank you.